Welcome to the Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership Podcast. Subscribe now so you don't miss a drop of straight talk you can't get anywhere else. We discuss the whiskeys to drink, music to listen to, and what it really takes to be an effective leader. I'm your host, Galen Bingham, the leadership strategist. Tonight's guest, the award-winning master blender for Doc Swinson's whiskeys, Jesse Parker. Hey, what you drink? Okay, so this is a first. This is a first. This is not going to be the first master blender that I will be talking to, because we've if you've been listening, you know that we've had a couple of master blenders on, and we've talked about their juice, and that makes for a great time. But this is the first time I'm having a master blender conversation with someone who actually sent me a bottle that I'm going to enjoy for the first time. So by definition, you are my favorite master blender. So with that, Jesse Parker, welcome to Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. Come on in, man. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Galen. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and talk about these awesome topics, and also be your favorite master blender by default here.
You're my absolute favorite. But hey, it's always interesting when I get an email from someone saying, hey, we've heard what you're doing. We'd love to be a part of it. How can we get someone from our distillery to be part of your conversation? That's always interesting. And, I'm at a point where I can't really talk to everybody. Everyone that contacts me, I get to be a little selective. And so I started looking into what you're doing, and you got like an amazing story, and you're only 21 years old. It's like, you're not supposed to be able to, first of all, you're not supposed to be able to do what you're doing. And then you're not supposed to be able to do it at this young of an age. So we've got a lot. I got a lot to talk to you about. I got a lot of questions. But my first question, and this is going to be kind of a no-brainer on your end, I'm sure. But my first question is, so what you drinking?
Well, we've got a little Doc Swinson's straight bourbon whiskey finished in Oloroso, Pedro Jimenez sherry, and cognac casks here on the show today, which is one of my personal favorites because it's the one I arguably put the most amount of time and energy into producing for each and every single batch, because it goes through so many different casks, and it's a couple different whiskeys blended together in the first place.
Oh, man. So you actually built this whiskey?
Yes, I absolutely built this whiskey. This one's been kind of a labor of love that has taken upwards of 4 years or so to kind of put together slowly, and about a year or so ago we decided to release it, and it's been well received, actually, very well received.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, since this is a gift, and again, hint, you were the first one and the only one to actually send me a bottle, I'm gonna pour this and have you talk me through what I'm enjoying, because I don't know that I've ever, again, here's another first. I've never actually had the master blender who built the bourbon talk me through what I'm enjoying. So I'm gonna first let's crack this bad boy open, and we're gonna give the first test. The first test is the sound of the pop. That was nice, and then.
Some of them can be kind of quiet. We use all natural corks, so some of them give you a really nice, I don't know if you heard that at all.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. It sounds better on your end, actually.
Yeah. There you go.
Oh, my gosh. All right. So talk me through this. Be gentle, but talk me through this.
Sure, absolutely. So one, I will admit, I don't usually like to tell people what they're tasting, because I would like them to kind of decipher that for themselves. After all, we all taste a little bit differently. But I don't want to influence your palate too much here. But I'll talk you through the process. And if certain little notes pop up on your palate, you should say them.
Right.
I think the first and foremost, when I was a teenager, actually, I used to spend a lot of time with a friend of mine's family's place back in Michigan, and his aunt was a grand sommelier, and she used to always say, "Just speak up." What she really meant by that was, don't be shy about it. The reality is, you kind of know what you're talking about to some degree, and you should be honest about it. And
Like it.
what she really meant was, if you smell something and it reminds you of something else, you're probably not wrong. You might not get it on the head, you might not get it perfectly, but it's a good start. So, with that being said, my journey has taken me about 10 years. I'll actually be 31 officially tomorrow. So I started when I was 21 in the commercial distilling industry, and this is where that road has taken me to one of my old time favorite blends here, the Doc Swinson's Triple Cask.
Oh my. Oh my. Yes. I'm just a tiny bit ahead of you, but oh my gosh. You know what? I'm not amazing at picking out the notes, but I will tell you what I don't taste. I don't taste a whole lot of peatiness. I don't feel a whole lot of heat. This is sitting right under 100. Man, this is nice.
Yeah. This is spectacular. The goal is to make something that was approachable, still be evident that it is American bourbon, which is first and foremost. It's the first thing on the label. We wanted to stick with that, and that's kind of the direction I wanted to take Doc Swinson's, was make sure our finished whiskeys still taste like whiskey, which is a little bit different than the majority of finished whiskeys on the market. Usually they're saturated in Pedro Jimenez or cognac or what be. And our goal is to emphasize the whiskey portion of it, because after all, that's what it really is. So really the basis of this product was, or the process behind this was, really kind of borrowed from Scotch and Irish whiskey blending techniques, where the idea is you utilize these different casks to just nuance the whiskey that you put in it, not consume it. And that's where you get these beautiful notes. We have these beautiful notes from the Oloroso, which is a little bit citrusy, right? You get a little bit of like orange peel, you get a little bit of nuttiness, some fruit leather from the Pedro Jimenez, a little bit of chocolate as well. And then of course the cognac just really lends this little bit, teeny bit of creme brulee,
Yes.
and then longevity to the whiskey itself. So really you're getting this bourbon that was already really nice in the first place. And in fact, it's actually a blend of two different bourbons that we use for this base from MGP. They're at least 5 years old. And then I finish them in a number of different casks from Europe, all ranging from standard 200 liter or 225 liter up to 600 liters, which is not very common to find in the Finnish whiskey world, American whiskey world.
This is actually giving me goosebumps. It is so good. I've actually never had this experience before. Very often, because I don't know, you tell me, but what I've noticed is that when you go into the aisle, you've got your straight bourbons, but then you've got what I call the boutique line, where you see a lot of, soaked in this cask, finished in that cask, with this, with that. And I tend to walk by those. I'm usually not a fan because they seem to overdo it. And there are some pretty popular brands over there. There's some pretty popular labels over there. But this is really, to your point, it tastes like a bourbon. It tastes like whiskey. But then there's just a small little hint of a finish that's different.
I mean, that's kind of it. Like, I think some of the inspiration from my childhood really was like cooking, right? I mean, you have a nice steak. You don't want the steak to just to be covered in sauce or too much pepper. You can't even taste the delicious meat. That's the point, right? Or you name it. You name any kind of ingredient like that. You want it to be the star of the dish, and the star of the dish here is still bourbon. That was the purpose, is to be nuanced. You can tease certain flavors out of the bourbon or emphasize them through utilizing these finishing casks. And that's the direction we took with it. So I always feel like it's kind of an uphill battle, because you're right. A lot of people are like, I get this all the time on podcasts, actually. Oh, I don't like finished whiskeys. Oh, they're just not that great. And whether they're purists, fine. Or it's because they've just had a lot of bad experiences. And to be fair, there are a lot of finished whiskeys out there that once again, just my opinion, that are overdone or not all that great. It's like they just check the box because that's just what was happening in the market. Like, okay,
Yeah.
we do these straight bourbons. Well, we'll do these on the side too, because everybody
Yeah.
else seems to be. And then there's
Well,
a few of us out there that have just really focused on how do we make finished whiskeys actually really excellent? How do we put our own mark on it and convince people that these are worth trying and stopping in that part of the aisle?
well, I'll tell you, for whatever my endorsement is worth, you have it. I'll tell you my specialty, my specialty is knowing what I like, and I drink what I like, and I have only one requirement, and that requirement is that if you don't like it, you don't drink it. That's my only requirement.
I think that's an excellent requirement to have, honestly. I mean, people all the time are like, oh, well, what should I like? Well, what do you like? And in the end, if you like it, there's nothing wrong with that. I think the only wrong spirit to drink is the one you, or anything, is the one you don't really
The
like.
one you don't like.
And hopefully it's not just because you don't think it's good, it's because you have actually tried and you're like, oh, that just doesn't go with me.
Man, well, I'll tell you, in this podcast, we talk about whiskey, we talk about jazz, we talk about leadership, but I'm going to tell you, I've been listening to a lot of my own episodes, and I've been hitting the jazz pretty good when I can. I hit the leadership really hard every time because that's really what I do. But the whiskey game has been kind of light. I'm going to admit that I've been kind of sagging on my whiskey, and I am just so glad you're here to really talk about the process, because we talk about how if you go back to the beginning of season 2, specifically the VIP conversation with Jared Simmons, he talks about how the through line for whiskey, jazz, and leadership for him is time. That it takes time to create a quality whiskey. It takes time to develop skill in your craft in jazz. And it takes time to see some things, to be able to train some things, to be an effective leader. So for him, the through line was time. But I'd love to ask you, what is the connection that makes this whiskey jazz leadership thing make sense?
Well, I feel like I'm going to be a broken record here a little bit. I think I would answer that with time as well, for quite a few reasons. One of them, when I was younger, I was always impatient and I was a perfectionist. So those two things don't really go well together. And as I've gotten older, and I think one of the main contributing reasons I got into whiskey, to be honest, or just barrel aged anything, is because you have to be patient. You have to trust in the process. You have to trust in what you've done. And even if it starts going south, you sometimes just have to wait and watch it happen and realize that maybe it's actually not wrong yet. And oftentimes it's not. It's just you're second guessing yourself, and you shouldn't. Which I think also leads into a leadership skill, to be honest. Knowing when you're wrong is one thing, but also knowing when you're right and sticking with it is another.
Oh my gosh. I got to get you to go back and say that again. You said knowing that you might not be wrong yet. I love that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you're paying more attention than maybe me at the moment.
No.
Yeah, knowing when you're wrong is really valuable, but also knowing when you're not wrong, even though you're second guessing yourself, is a really hard skill, I think, to hone. And it's something that I'm working on. I'm only 31 now, right? I have a lot to learn in this world, and I think that's really the connection to help answer that question. Is I think jazz, whiskey, and leadership, they all coincide with the typical roller coaster of life, right? How you learn, how you perceive the world, and how you navigate it. And being patient and assessive is really important.
Wow. Wow. Man, I love that connection. Talk to me a little bit about what does that look like when you're making a whiskey? Because being impatient, I'm sure that there's a temptation to want to taste it, right? Well, it's been aged for 9 months. Let's taste it. Well, it's been there for a year and a half now. Let's taste it. Can you do that? I don't think you can do that. Can you?
So now keep in mind, I mean, I'm learning as I go. So I think one of the most interesting things about Doc Swinson's in particular is it really showcases the journey that I am taking to understand the ingredients that I have and how to work with them. So it's one of the reasons why we put batch numbers on the bottles. You can look at the notes online if I've updated them. I don't always get to it. But so you can actually experience the journey that I'm taking through the processes that I've put down to make these products. I taste quite often actually through the process. So yes, I actually do. It's one of my favorite things when everything gets quiet here after the production day has gone through. I have got my emails out, my all my design work is done, etc. Usually it's incredibly quiet here, and I wander through the barrel warehouse. It's quite humorous, actually. I just kind of wander through. I put some good music on, whatever I'm feeling in the moment. It kind of echoes throughout this big barrel warehouse, and we have these racks just full of barrels. And they're all over the floors. They're all the way up to the ceilings. You name it. And I'll go through, and I kind of, every couple of days, I pick a set of barrels that I want to taste. And then I keep little samples, from very specific times. I'm like, oh, this is when I think it's really nice, and it's been at this many days, or this many months, or this many years, and I kind of cross-reference them from time to time, and I see how they evolve. So yes, I taste entirely or through the entire process. It does take a long time. It takes me months to sometimes compile a blend that I feel is in the right place to be able to be released for our brand. So nothing's stuck to a specific time frame. I get that question a lot. They're like, "Oh, so what's the magic number? Is it 45 days? Is it 7 months? Is it?" When I say, or it's all of it. I know a lot of people swear by, master blenders. Like people have done this for as long as I've been alive, will swear by a certain number of days, and I'm sure they have their reasonings behind it, whatever they may be. But I take a couple of my pages actually from, I think, more of the old world techniques. That's why we slap it on our website everywhere. from the Scottish and Irish whiskey blenders, from cognac blenders in particular, where they have a number of different ages in barrels, ranging up to over 100 years, and they pull small bits and pieces from each one of these out to assemble the full blend. And that's what I'm working towards here. So I actually have stuff aging from 45 days all the way up to over 2 years now in casks, finishing
Wow.
casks before they're blended together.
So now, how does one become a master blender? I mean, what was your journey like? I'm sure you didn't just roll out of the sixth grade and say, you know what, in a few years, I'd love to be a master blender. Or maybe you did. I don't know.
I wish it was that obvious. No, when I was younger, one, I don't have any sort of pedigree in this, right? I don't even have a degree in blending or flavor science, so nothing like that. This is just what happened, I guess, in my life, and something that I attached myself to at a pretty young age. I learned about a decent amount about brewing beer from my parents as a kid. I used to make liqueurs for the holidays for my family members with my grandparents, things like that. And I just found a fascination with the processes and the history behind all of these different products, whether it be American whiskeys, cognac, sherry, scotch, you name it, wines. There's so much fascinating history behind it. And for a long time, I actually wanted to be a chef. I really love flavors. I think there's so much beauty in spending time with flavors, which is why, when you don't get a good meal, you got to cry a little bit. Nutrition's important, and it kind of transports you. I think that's what's beautiful about flavors. It transports you to a different time in your life or a memory, and whiskey in particular does a really good job of that.
Wow.
And I want to share my experiences with those who are willing to pick up my bottles.
That's another similarity between whiskey and jazz for me, anyway, because for me, whenever I put on or see anyone reference Eddie Harris and Les McCann, the Swiss Movement, which was the first jazz album I ever remember my dad playing. And the reason I remember it was because I couldn't stand it, right? I just couldn't stand jazz when I was a little kid. And whenever I saw him pull out that white cardboard album cover, I knew that the next 45 minutes was going to be sheer torture for me, right? As a kid, right? 12, 13, 10 years old. But now it has such such a nostalgic reference for me that it's actually one of my favorite albums because of the memories. And I know for you've got some pretty strong music chops here. I mean, you're talking Etta James, Frank Sinatra, Stan Getz. Talk to me a little bit about this resonance that whiskey creates from memories, and how that might relate to music.
Certainly. once again, I think just like a good song or a good artist, I mean, these things transport you once again back into a different time, a memory or something usually whatever it is, emotionally stimulating. I mean, that's partly the reason why I selected the artists I did in your questionnaire was because those are what transported me back to my childhood. It transported me back to every time I had a fresh strawberry out of the garden that I grew with my mother, cooking French toast in the morning with my dad on a weekend, or every time I taste something really citrusy, it reminds me of making baked grapefruit from when my dad would come back from being gone for 6 months for work out of the year. And there's all these really beautiful moments that I cherish, and I happen to equate them to food, flavor. Which I mean, what's better than good company and food most of the time, right? And good.
That's it. Wait a second. Baked grapefruit? I've never heard of baked grapefruit.
Surprisingly, I like to surprise people and make this one all the time for friends because they're like, "What in the world is this?" Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's really just covered in butter. It's like a medium for butter. You slice a grapefruit in half, you cover it in butter, brown sugar. I know people do all sorts of different things, nutmeg, clove, whatever you like. Sometimes they'll put Angostura bitters on it, and you bake it in the oven for like 45 minutes, and it just caramelizes everything.
Mm.
And it's savory, it's sweet, it's citric, it's everything you want in the morning. So I highly recommend a good baked grapefruit if you're ever into it.
Oh my gosh. And you can still pass that by as breakfast, right? Because it's grapefruit.
Yeah, I mean it's healthy, right? I mean, despite the half a stick of butter on the top and
Three cups of sugar, I'm sure you're gonna put on top of it.
yeah, I don't know. It felt healthier than a lot of things, let me tell you.
So now talk me through again, just how did you end up going into this place? I understood that the first thing you did was not whiskey, but you had some success with some other adult beverages, won some awards, and you're like, hey, I'm relatively good at this thing. How did you become the master blender for Doc Swinson?
It's kind of funny. Actually, I'm going to start this off here. I always found a little bit of contention with the statement master because I'm only 31 now, right? I mean, how much of a master can I be at 31? And then my PR team is always telling me I gotta run with it. Stop being so humble about it. In the grand scheme of things, I remember reading when I was a kid. In order to become a master, you have to spend something on average like 10,000 hours doing it. I can tell you one thing, I've definitely spent more than 10,000 hours doing this.
Wow.
I think far more, actually. I'm probably closer to 30,000 at this rate. And I'm still learning it. Absolutely. There's always something to be learned. So I think becoming a master at something, it takes a lifetime truly, right? I mean, it's being able to reassess and know when you can make something better. I mean, I don't think there's a point in time I ever said this one's perfect. I just know that these ones are really good, and that's why I'll put them in a bottle. But to draw back from that, my journey on this was kind of happenstance. Like I said earlier, I was really interested in alcoholic beverages in particular. I think there's something really beautiful about fermentation, the art of it, whether it's kombucha or pickles or you name it. And when I was 21, I was going to university and I was looking for a job. And I thought it would be interesting to get into craft distillation. It was kind of the beginning of the craft distillery boom here in the United States. So this was 2012-ish. And I came across this distillery in Washington State here. I'm up by the Canadian border on the coast, and they grow apples. And I started, or I went there for an interview, and I figured they would have hired somebody, and I could just be like the assistant. I was still going to school. I'd only have to work a couple hours, here and there. You maybe just do taste room stuff and learn from somebody in the back. I thought it was fascinating. And they decided to hire me, and they didn't hire anybody else to distill. I mean, they didn't have a background in it either. And essentially, the owners showed me basically how to turn on the boiler and said, "Here's all the apple juice. Figure it out."
Wow.
So after about a year or so of doing that process, you don't have a whole lot in barrels at that point in time, and it wasn't a particularly large distillery. So we needed to make some money, and what we did was released vodka, some unaged brandy called eau de vie, and then gin. And we, on a whim, the owner and I decided that he was like, why don't we send it off to a couple competitions and see if anybody thinks it's worth anything, And we sent it off to New York International Spirits Competition, and we ended up walking away with we were tied for first place technically, I think, but internationally for our gin, which was pretty incredible as a 21-year-old who was just kicking around at night throwing botanicals in something. I mean, I had an idea what I was doing and what direction I want to go, but I was 21 making gin.
Wow.
Yeah, we even took out I think we beat out the top 3 gins or something in the world at the time, which was incredible.
I think your story so far really does bring to life what I talk about as the metaphor of jazz, where here are the basics, here are the fundamental elements. Here's how you turn on this boiler without blowing the place up. Go figure out how to make this thing work.
Yeah, I mean, it's raw and it's from the person's experience, right? I mean, that's probably partly what makes jazz so beautiful, right? It's like a representation of life in front of your eyes, just put into a different medium. And I mean, I truly wish I knew a lot more about jazz. And it was kind of funny when I was looking into the questionnaire a little bit. I was like, gosh, what? Humorous enough, I do go to a jazz night almost every single week downtown here, but I couldn't tell you at all what they're playing. It's very jam bandy, kind of like jazz stuff. And I couldn't tell you. Usually I'm having a beer, hanging out with friends, there's jazz playing in the background. And I was thinking, I'm like, what kind of jazz really has spoken to me over the years? And it took me a while for it to hit, but it was actually a really Latin jazz.
Yeah.
It's the stuff that stole my heart. And I think it's really representative of, for some reason, the experiences that resonated with me when I was younger. I couldn't exactly pinpoint why.
Hey, it's not too late. Hit that subscribe button so you're sure to catch the next episode. If you're really enjoying the vibe, leave us a review or become a VIP for guest and show exclusives. Cheers.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.